Okay, so, hey yo, my fellow Rumble Maniacs. It's Mr. Rumble Roses here, and I am back yet with another installment of what I like to technically call as Rumble Rants and Rambles, where I talk about something that's on my mind and just get it out of my system. And like I usually do for a lot of these things, I do things unscripted because I feel like if you do things scripted, you're not really putting passion into it because, at least to me, in my opinion, if you don't like, have like your pause moments or like your maybe kind of talk about stuff that's that feels like that's like a repeat or that's like a repeat button or whatever, then it's not real. Now, I'm pretty sure people can argue otherwise, but you know, to each their own. You do. I'm not saying you shouldn't do script stuff if you or whatever. You do you basically. But anyway, so today I wanted to talk about something that happened quite recently on Twitter. So there's a well-known content creator by the name of Fresh Perspective. Now, I've met Fresh Perspective a little bit. I think I've been in some of his streams and everything like that. I think like I've even seen him when he raided an old friend and whatnot. And and I even though like I haven't been to like every single one of his streams and all that, but I would say overall that Fresh is a pretty cool dude. Like I would recommend the bejesus out of him. Especially like if you wanted like the good vibes and and all that stuff. Well, he made a little. I think like he made a little tweet talking about Survivor perks, and I think one of the things that he was talking about was a perk known as Decisive Strike. It might be something. It might be. I don't know what the new name is because of how Halloween got taken out of the DVD. So I go by just what it's known for. But anyway, so I think like he was talking about the whole situation of um like I think it was like either how decisive strike needs like a negative consequence in order to to use it, or it was the whole situation with like playing against perks and not survivors. Now, I have myself some choice words to say about this, and I think going back to it, I think it was still probably the whole situation with DS, because I'm kind of remembering like I'm kind of remembering because some random person that I don't even know who they were by name, they were talking about like how they were talking about like how Decisive Strike has its own little like flaws and what have you. But anyway, so I had my choice words to say about it, and we kind of had like a little bit of a back and forth on Twitter. So much so that at one point that Fresh, he quote tweeted one of my replies, and he was talking about like how Survivor mains need to play like a month of Killer Straight and all that stuff, and they can both see like both sides of what's going on. And I don't. No, I'm not. No, I'm not saying like I hate the guy for doing that because I feel like and I'm not saying like I hate Fresh for doing that. It's just kind of like there's like that sort of defensive side to me where it's like I'm getting put on blast, despite the fact that like I'm like the lesser guy and not really know because like I'm seen as more of the survivor main and don't know jack shit about everything that's going on with Killer. Um, but but like I said, we had a little back and forth, and I said my pieces, he said his, and then some other random person, kind of, chimes in, they do their stuff and things. And then hours go by, I cool down as much as I can, and then I send Fresh a chat DM. I'm gonna say like a chat DM because of how they changed like the whole personal messaging thing on Twitter. Now, as of right now, I have not heard from Fresh himself, and I don't really expect to, which is fine. I'm not expecting, everyone that I said message to always reply. But basically, I was talking about like the whole situation of I'm just so sick and tired of hearing the same old copy and pasted whole hallways so everything blends together, and and it's just kind of like the same old stick of of like people, kind of making the same arguments that just, in my opinion, are really stupid. Now, now I'm talking about now I said this, I think like in the quote tweet, reply in the reply of the quote tweet that Fresh had done about me, but I have played Killer. Now, I'd say like I'm more towards the Survivor player more than the Killer player, but like I've done a lot on the Killer side of things. Like like I've bought all the characters. At this point in time, from like spring, from having, like Trapper all the way to fucking, I think it was like, um, Vecna from Stranger Things Chapter 2 and all that stuff. Like I've played Killer. I've played all the Killers. I've adapted them all. Everything like that. And I've had, like my good games and my bad games. Um, with all the killers. I've had I've had those kind of things. Um, and I've always said that, whether it be like Survivor or Killer, like I'm not the best, person. I'm not the best player in the world. Like I'm just an average Joe. Like and that's one of those little things where it's like I would wear that fucking badge proudly on my chest. You know, because like I say, like like I try my best, to play the game as best as possible. Maybe have a little fun and create random memories. Whether it be like from stuff that I do myself on either side to maybe meet new people because because I've come across a lot of TTVs and everything like that, and got to meet them a little bit. Kind of have a nice little chat here and there, and stuff like that. And I guess you could say that just like how killer mains are passionate about their thing. I'm a survivor main who's passionate about you know their importance, the importance of things. And the reason why like I kind of went off on this whole thing is because again, like I said, it was the whole situation of like the whole copy pasted, same same. I won't say stick, whether that's the right term or not, but like just the same old song and dance that I've heard like a lot of people say, where it's like, oh, like this game is totally survivor sided, um, killers get all these second chance perks, and everything, and I'm playing against perks, not survivors, and everything like that, and like every perk that that helps the survivors should always have a downside and everything like that, and it just it feels fucking lopsided to me. It's like in my head. It feels like, and I still stand by this too, but it's like, I feel like they're trying, like, a lot of killer players and stuff are trying to say, like, hey, you know, what do they want to say that they're not trying to say gut the whole thing entirely, but that's the impression that I'm getting. It's like, gut these survivor perks, make them useless, and have us only, and have the game only favor killer side. Okay? Like I said, the whole situation with the Sicer strike, like, that was the thing that was kind of like the top, the main topic, and then like I see other things like, I see things like shoulder to burden, talking about like how talking about like how that needs like a hard nerve for a rework or something like that because, and just kind of a kind of this is kind of like an estimated quote of what someone had said about in the post that they talked about um where it's like where it's like they say that they need that they need to be nerfed to the ground, need to be gutted, need to be reworked um, because being able to take away a hook state should never have been a thing that to be implemented into to a game like to a game like this. And I'm just here thinking to myself like, man, like we always want to try and have like the quote unquote like unique perks and everything like that, and then we get something like shoulder to burden, which honestly like like, I don't really see people running as much as a lot of others. But then again, it's like I feel like this whole thing comes around like high level MMR, type players, and I say almost like the same thing kind of goes for like the likes of like the whole deja vu hyper focus stakeout fast track scenario. Now, I will admit, like, I have like a little build, I kind of have that little build myself. Even though, like, I think like I take hyper focus off to have, I think it's like prove thyself, because I'm more of the gen doer of, on the survivor side of things. Okay. Now, I know that like when it comes to matches, and stuff like online matches, there's always different outcomes. Like not every outcome is always going to be the same. Like maybe maybe like now maybe there might be like the quote unquote percentages of like how things are, but then again it's like it's just numbers. That's not always really known to be quite accurate, at least in my opinion. And I think a lot of people have also said that as well. Um, but but like a lot of times when I play Survivor, like I've seen moments where it's like, sometimes there may be those moments where killers will, try and do like a little bit of tunneling. Sometimes there'll be those moments where, survivors kind of like not make the best decisions, and then kind of like and then things kind of snowball. Or, things kind of go decently well where it's like, oh, like a few gens pop, um, killer, gets, is like somehow managing to 2-look everyone and somehow still gets a 4K before, like, before the last gen pops or, what have you. Like, I get that. I get that, I understand that, that's just how, that's how these things work. Now again, like I said, I'm not high level MMR comp player, whatever. Like I'm just a guy who, likes to try and get on the game from time to time. Maybe do a little thing of like, maybe getting some blood points. Maybe hoping to play with some friends that I never thought I would ever be able to really, play with. Maybe get queued up with them. All that just jazz. And just, have, trying to have, a memorable moment. Whether it be good, whether it be good, decent, maybe a little bit bad, and what have you. It's just one of those little. I guess you could say it's just like a I live for the moment kind of thing, and I'm just just a guy who tries to play out the games as best they can, and just hates having to see things where it's like people they're like pitchforks and torches, rallying for behavior to um, gut gut parts because because of how like because of how like somehow it's fucking them over on their games. When in reality, it's like not everyone has the same is always having the same experience you're having. Now, I can understand about like how some people are when it comes to like certain, like, begin having perk changes and, things like, like either like reworks or, crazy ass nerfs and things like that. And, and like I said, I have some of those moments as well. Like, I remember like back in the day whenever I used to use the perk, I think it was like Deerstalker. I would also kind of use that for like a random little chill build, if you will, where it's like, if I'm going around, and trying like, to, secure kills and what have you. That like I sometimes might, have on Deerstalker, so that way I can be able to see, the auras of slug survivors, you know. Because I can understand that, that like sometimes where, gens are going by, that you have to kind of, try and do your best to put pressure on, on people. Like I've had that shit both ways, and trust me when I say that. Like I said, I've had that shit happen to me both ways. Like playing as and against killers. You know, I still will never understand why, that they had done what they done with the perk Wake Up. Because I'd say Wake Up was one of my favorite little, you know, I guess you could say like, niche perks, if you will, to use on my Survivor gameplay, because I was always known to use Deja Vu, Wake Up, Left Behind, and Saboteur. But then I did a little thing where it's like I swapped out Saboteur with thing I was like 5 moves ahead, because it was kind of like that whole, because it was kind of like, that little, windows of opportunity type thing, but also, allow me to do stuff a little bit quicker or earlier than normal, and I was able to go from there. Um, because, because I always liked having, the ability, to try and like actually, like, not only about to like trying to escape, just like how killers are trying to to get kills and everything like that. But it's just one of those little things where it's just like, I don't know why behavior, did what, I don't know why behavior, because at one point in time, Wake Up was actually going to be was actually going to get buffed. But then, they scrapped, apparently they scrapped that idea, and they reworked Wake Up to where it's like, oh, as long as, like there's X amount of people alive, you have like, this amount of chances, or this amount of like, more oomph, to how quickly you can be able to get an exit gate open. And I thought that was pretty stupid because, in my opinion, it was like, oh, I'm guessing that killer mains, we're just like how killer mains, bitch about, survivors and all that stuff, because it's always, at least in my opinion, it's always like an us versus them scenario, where it's like, oh, I guess killer mains must have been, bitching their heads off at behavior, saying like, hey, like this perk Wake Up, it's not, it's not doing us killer players, it's not doing us killer mains any good, because, because they can be able to open gates fast and all that stuff, and I can't be able to really get there with, with this, like this insert killer here, because, they're not like S-tier killers like fucking, like Nerfs or Bly, even though Bly is now getting, a nerf, I think, like, probably in a couple of weeks or so. At least what I'm assuming, because of what I've been seeing, like, a lot of posts about, like, talk about, because I've been seeing, like, a lot of posts about, like, how, apparently, like, in a couple of weeks, I guess, like, it was when the update's gonna, like, the patch update stuff's gonna, drop, and that's also when Legion apparently is gonna be coming back, which I can only wonder how that's gonna go. And and I remember even saying this in a comment video. I think it's like from Jotaro's video about like how he I'm like how I miss my Legion, and all that stuff. But I was talking about the whole situation of how I feel that, if Legion comes back, that it's going to be like a Legion apocalypse um where it's like, there's going to be nothing but legions, and And like Legion players, and for Legion players, as much as they want to, go around and be all stabby and everything like that, like I was saying in the thing where it's like, I feel like they're probably not going to have that they're not going to have a match because like people are going to be like, either like DCing or giving up because Legion is like because even though Legion is a quote unquote C tier killer, but they're not really the best killer to face because of how it's always bending simulator and it's and a lot of people don't want to be fucking injured against the Legion. Even I don't like being injured against the Legion because I don't want to be like injured the whole entire time, and all of a sudden they somehow get their distance or whatever, and I don't get and I don't like pre-run in time or whatever, and all of a sudden I just fall just get got because of the golden rule, if you will, of not being able to, about like, oh, you shouldn't be able to heal against Legion, period. But anyway, but yeah, like I just want to kind of just to share my thoughts on everything, kind of just maybe clear some stuff up because like I said, I'm honestly at this point, like I said, I'm just so sick and tired of hearing about like how killer mains are wanting survivor perks, like nerfed to the fucking ground or gutted, where it's like where it's like, oh, they should be able to have like these second chance perks and fight back, ways to like fight back and all that because I feel like what they're trying to say is like it's like they're trying to turn the game lopsided onto their favor, where it's like, oh, give me all of this and have survivors and give survivors none of that. That's the mindset that I get from seeing all these these random ass posts. And I'm just like and like people always talk about like how they want balance in this game. And the thing, and I even said this in one of the handful of posts that I did a reply from Freshest thing where I was like, hey, as much we want as much as you want to have balance in this game, you can never get it because there's always going to be the public outcry because it's like, oh, you do things here, and it's like, oh, you're favoring the killers more, or like, oh, you're favoring survivors more, and then it's like overall you just it's overall just a problem where it's like you can't please everybody. You're never gonna please everybody, and and I guess like in my mind it's like I've just learned to accept the fact that it's like it's always gonna be like an us versus them thing, and like never and no one's ever going to be truly happy. This is not gonna be like the fucking Animal Crossing, slash Doom, community where it's like, hey, oh, everyone's coming together, and doing all this, praising all the joy or whatever. Even if that might be a completely random ass thing to bring up, but still, it's just, like no one's ever gonna be truly happy, you know, and I can understand about like how killer perks have gotten like the craziest nerfs and all that, but I'd say like it's one of those little things where it's like it's also gone both ways, because it's like because a lot of people often say the word often bring up the word unhealthy, it's like it's like this perk is unhealthy for the game. These combo perks are unhealthy for the game, and it's just like and it's just like you know there's no such thing as unhealthy because a perk by itself is not going to guarantee you all the value in the world that you want. Okay, like you're gonna have to put some perks together. That's why there's a thing called the loadout. Like you want to have like loadouts for for certain things. Like maybe you want to do an all gen build, or you want to do like an all chase build, or maybe be a healer of some kind. And that's how it is. And you know, as much as we want, you know, things to have changed on this side or the other, you know, it's just something. It's this little thing where it's like it's more than likely never going to happen. And I think like you know the more, and I feel like, but and it's just, I feel like the more if people would just you know accept the fact that you know you're not going to get the balance that you're so desperately craving to, and you know being on your hands and knees and praying to behavior you saw above, you know, behavior gods above or whatever. That you know that's not that you're not going to get you know that you're not going to see the light of day with that. You know, and you know what, and like and I'm trying like you know do the whole like oh we're killing the meta of you know having like you know like these like you know like these perks working or like where it's like oh these perks are working well together in a synergized way. So you know let's you know let's like you know let's neuter that and have it to where people have to use something else because you know not every perk is great. You know like there's like you know there's a combination of perks or well, there's a number of perks. It's like there's some there's some that people are going to use from time to time. Others are going to be using a lot more, and then there's going to be those perks that are just going to be like at the bottom of the barrel. You know, no matter how many times you try to to like do this, that, and the other, it more than likely will not change the outcome as to what people would want to see. Like like for example, the invocation perks. Like I know there's that one. I think it was like weaving spiders from Sable, where it's like oh you go to the basement, do a little like a little ritual in the basement, to have like a BNP on all the gens, but at the cost of being broken and all that, and it's like you know, but I don't know. I'm just so fed up with this bullshit. I wish it would just stop. But even though like in my head, it's like I wish all this shit would just stop. Killer mains would just shut the fuck up about like about the stupidest shit. Maybe it'll be like that one step closer. To having like maybe like a decent community. You know, but again, I'm not high MMR, and again, I'm going like going back and forth, bouncing around like a fucking ball or whatever. But I'm just like I'm just trying to just get it out there as best as I can. You know, I'm I guess you could say I'm just a passionate but average Joe. Who likes being able to play the game from time to time. And even though I am more of a survivor main versus the killer main, like I know how things are for killer. Like but like I can understand where it's like perks were known to be a thing to put together to have good synergy with another thing. Even like if it has like one maybe like with like one perk plus one add-on for like say like a killer. You know. And this and like the whole situation with the whole like for the people buckle up. It's like yeah, I know how it is on both sides from that perspective. Where it's like you get someone down, and all of a sudden like someone comes in, it hits someone with 40 people, and stuff like that. But moments like those is where it's like it's a high risk, high reward type of type of situation, you know, and like and it's like while it may upset one side, but like the other side is using it to try and help to try and help the the their side win or like survive a bit more. you know and it's just and I'm just sitting here just thinking to myself, it's like just because you don't like the like said like insert perk here doesn't mean that it needs to be like gutted so much where it's like no one's gonna use it or it's gonna have like the stupidest downside where it's like, oh, you use shoulder and burn, where it's like, oh, survivor use shoulder burn, to take away a hook stick from someone, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, boom, that person is broken for the rest of the trial. You know, yeah, that's just how I see it. It's like it's just, but yeah, that's all I have to really say. Because otherwise, then I'm probably gonna be repeating myself and making this video even longer. Like I said, I just wanted to, just to say, like I'm, the fresh perspective. If someone else sees this, I'm sorry, for the, for the battle, for the war of words and all that. But while I still still stand by, a lot of things I say. Like I said, I'm overall just sick and tired of hearing all this shit over and over again. Whether someone's like a killer man more than a survivor man, or vice versa, what have you. Like I'm just tired of hearing this crap, and I just wish for it to stop. And everything. I just want to say, I could just want just fucking play the game out. Play the game out as best as you can. With what you have, and just go from there. But anyway, if you got this far into the video, thank you for watching / listening to my my rants and rambles and all that. Like I said, I just wanted to get this shit off my chest, because it's one of those little things where it's like it gets pent up so much, and I feel like I'm gonna do something that I might regret, and I don't want to do something that I might regret, because I don't want to be burning bridges with good people. And even though, like I said, even though like I don't go to Fresh Perspective streams and all that stuff and all that, like whatever, I don't want there to be any hate between him and I or anyone else that I might have had like a little discussion with, whether they want to accept my apologies, or what have you. I just want to get it out there, get it off my chest, and just clear everything off my desk, pretty much. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video or live stream. But until then, as always, please take care of yourselves, and have a good week or weekend.